Burning away years of oppression. For almost 2 months, Iranian women in the country and around the world have set their headscarves ablaze in protest. They told us doing so is a rejection of the mullah's rule over Iran.
We are fighting for the freedom of choice, not against hijab.
I don't have hijab these days, and I dare to walk or even sit in front of the Riyadh police, while my aunt, who is also an active protester, wear hijab because she believes in it.
The hijab became mandatory in Iran after the 1979 revolution. It's a key aspect of the Islamic Republic's identity. Women who refuse the compulsory hijab can be beaten or arrested by the notorious morality police, the same police that detained 22-year-old Jina Mahsa Amini for wearing her hijab improperly. She later died in custody. Burning the headscarf became a way to voice rage over her death. But it is also about rejecting the compulsory hijab, Iran's leadership altogether, and demanding equal rights.
When we say that we are against a mandatory hijab, it's equal to saying that we are against Islamic Republic. The mentality of this regime is interwoven with suppressing women.
We are our father's belongings when we are not married, and after marriage, we are the belongings of our husbands. How is this fair? How is this humane?
It's an anti-Islamic Republic movement because Islamic Republic wants to control the woman's body, and a very important part of their propaganda is about hijab.
This whole thing is not just about hijab. We simply don't want the Islamic State, this regime. It doesn't work for us and for our country. It has never worked.
The regime has shown no signs of letting up and has brutally suppressed protesters. Yet the women we have spoken to say change is already here.
It's definitely the beginning of a new era. The solidarity that has built up seems to be fortifying with every day that passes.
Women in t-shirts and without headscarves on the streets are becoming ubiquitous. I'm treated with respect, even offered a seat when I go without a scarf and a short coat to the bank or hospital by women and men alike.
We're so hopeless because we could see no bright or even defined future. When I saw the crowds of protesters everywhere, I found that hope again.
Regardless of what happens next in the Islamic Republic, the Iranian people's bravery has sparked solidarity worldwide, a spirit that is unlikely to die anytime soon.
I'd like to bring in our correspondent, Aya Ibrahim, who filed that report. Aya, as your report showed, we are seeing incredible courage meet shocking brutality. For obvious reasons, the women in your report chose to remain anonymous. So how difficult was it for you to find Iranian activists willing to speak out?
It was very difficult. I mean, we spent weeks trying to find women from, different all walks of life to speak to us for this report. We put out some calls on our social media accounts asking Iranian women to reach out to us. And when we did that, we were actually quite overwhelmed with the response. We received dozens of emails, messages, and women who were willing to speak with us. But as you point out, their identities had to be concealed for their own safety. I mean, one cannot overstate the level of brutality that this regime has chosen to respond to the protests with. We've seen death sentences being issued against protesters. We've seen reports of children as young as 10 years old being killed in connection with these protests. We've seen footage of university dormitories being raided in the middle of the night by security forces, people being shot point blank on the streets. But these women, regardless of that brutality, still wanted to speak with us because they wanted the world to know, as they told me, that their protest is about a change. They're looking for a real change and not some kind of reform for the regime. And they felt that in the media, their message is sometimes obscured. Yeah.
But we've seen protests break out in Iran many times over the years. Is it so different this time?
That's definitely what people that I've spoken to have said. They've said, they've had previous protest movements that were targeted towards things like the price of living or allegations of election rigging or looking for particular freedoms or reforms. But the difference between those protest movements, they told me, and this one, is that they're not really looking for reform anymore. They've had, as one of the women I've spoken to in the report said, enough of this regime, and they're looking for change. Now, whether that radical change is coming anytime soon, that remains to be seen, but that's definitely what they're calling for. And another perhaps notable difference in this particular protest movement, and that's something that I definitely saw in the diversity of the people that I've spoken to, is that they come from different classes, different ages, different professional backgrounds, and that is something that we've also seen very much reflected in this protest movement. It has cut through class, gender, religion, ethnicity. It is also very surprising to see just how young this protest movement is. I mean, we've seen reports and we've heard from people about how Gen Z is the generation leading this protest movement.
And can you tell us in more detail about how these activists hope that the protests will end if they indeed want to see a complete collapse of the regime?
Well, they're definitely saying that they're not going to stop hitting the streets and they're not going to stop raising their voices. But they're also acutely aware of the fact that, there are different factors or circumstances, if you will, that have to come together for a regime like the Iranian regime to collapse. And what they told me is that they're hoping that their message and their movement stays on airwaves abroad and that their message continues to be amplified in international media and that they would continue getting support from world leaders, as we've seen in the past couple of weeks.
Thank you very much for that. That's our correspondent, Aya Ibrahim.